Let's have a look at the other pages now at Key Stage 2. So attainment, Ofsted has gone away from the standard bars showing the percentage of passers or not passers and have given us something similar to what we've got in phonics. So we have got your scaled scores starting at 80. So any pupils that weren't entered into the test or didn't get a minimum raw score of 3 are not included in here, and so you'll find that the starting point for your blue line, which is your school, might not be exactly the same as the number of your cohort. So go 80, 90, 100, so that's your pass mark, 110 is your high standard. So again, just like at phonics, the red line is your national and the blue line is your school. So in this particular case, we were above the national average until we get to about a scaled score of 97. And then we're below it between there and about 107 by around some 10 percentage, which for a cohort size of 100 would be about 10 pupils then. We then meet the national average almost at around the 108 scaled score and are a fraction below, maybe 4 or 5% below from there to nearly the end. So the reason why this has been included rather than the standard bars is that Ofsted obviously want to look not just at how many pupils passed or got the greater depth or high standard, but also what happened at the 80, the 90, the 95 scaled score, the 105. This allows for a bit more nuanced analysis. You'll also notice in 2018, here's your school percentage achieving the expected standard, comparison with the national, and whether this was statistically significant or not. And just like in phonics, I've seen around 11% be roughly where the statistical significance starts and ends. It does depend on your cohort size. However, a bigger cohort, you need fewer percentage difference to be statistically significant. Turning to the scatter plots, I wondered whether Ofsted would remove the scatter plots from the IDSR because now there is this floor level, this minimum amount that your pupils can have in terms of a progress score when calculating your school's progress. Well, it turns out I was half right. Ofsted have removed the attainment scatter plots but have kept the progress scatter plots. So here's an example of a progress scatter plot. So we have your key stage 1 prior attainment going across, where 12 to 17.99 are your middle prior attainers. So your low prior attainers are 12 and below, and your high prior attainers are 18 and above. In 2017, the shapes were being used for boy, girl. Now they're being used for disadvantaged and not disadvantaged, and the colours are being used for SEN and not SEN. So here we have a pupil who was a level 1 pupil, average point score of 9, who had a progress score of -10. Now, one of the ways that I can read this is I personally have a look at it in 4 different zones. Pupils who have made much higher progress than they were expected to, pupils who have made about the same amount of progress, positive or minus, and pupils who have made much worse progress than were they expected to. So this, again, allows for some conversation starters and also allows you to find some good news stories in almost every school. You'll generally have, even with schools with a progress score of -3, -4, you'll generally have some good success stories. So whether it's in your low prior attainers, your middles or your highs. And of course you can also divide them up into your lows, middle and highs as well. Now if you want to know roughly what the progress effect of one particular pupil is, then you take their pupil score and you divide by the cohort size. It's not entirely accurate. I think the real answer for this is about -0.406, but it's close enough. If you want a closer version, then I wouldn't be dividing this by 51, I'll divide it by 50. And that gets me a bit closer. Early in the IDSR, currently on page 4 in my version, but it might vary, we have the progress quintiles for the last 3 years for reading, for writing, and for maths. So in other words, was your progress in the top 20% of all schools or the bottom 20% of all schools? Was it significantly above average, which is in green, or significantly below average, which is in the red? Now, unlike the 2017 version, this no longer gives you your percentage quintile, your percentage number. So in other words, were you in the top 1% of schools or the bottom 1% of schools? Why would that be useful? Well, let's say we have a school which has gone down by quintile. So here we have your middle prior retainers, 39 of them. They were in the 3rd quintile, they've gone down to the 4th quintile. Now, this could mean that they had gone down by 1 percentile. They've gone from being in the top 60% of schools to the top 61. Or alternatively, it could mean that they have moved 39 percentiles. They could have been from the top 41% of schools to the top 80% of schools. Unfortunately, such an analysis is no longer easy to do in the IDSR. However, we can help. If you go into DAISI.education and you go to the blog, there is a Key Stage 2 rankings. And if you have a look at that, you will see, if I scroll down, the rankings for, say, your reading SATs exam. So suppose your attainment in reading was 56%, then you know you are in the 93rd, 94th percentile rank. Similarly, if for progress, suppose your progress score is minus 0.2, then you can look up and you can see you're in the 58th, 57th ranking, somewhere around there. So you can use this information to supplement the information which is here. And to get your 2017 and 2016 rankings, have a look at your 2017 IDSR. So in the next video, we'll have a look at areas to investigate for Key Stage 2 attainment and Key Stage 2 progress. So here are some areas to investigate for Key Stage 2. Name of subject. So we're not talking science here, or GPS, we're talking maths, reading, writing. Was at or above national for all prior attainment groups or for your low, middle and high prior attainment groups. So you can see the percentages needed in the ASP. Alternatively, were you in the bottom 20% for at least 3 years for all pupils? So you need to be around the 60-62% mark for reading and maths for 2018 and 2017, and you need to be in the low 50s or below in 2016. The 3-year average reading attainment score was in the top or bottom 10%. Now you can get this information in the ASP 3-year trend tab. And to be in the top or bottom 10%, you need to be around the 107.5 mark or below 100.7. Progress in name of subject was significantly above average and in the highest 10%, or significantly below average and in the lowest 10%. In other words, were you well above average or were you well below average? So that is what all of this means. So you need to have around 3.2 or above to get that as a strength, or below minus 2.8 in reading and minus 3.2, minus 3.3 in maths. Now with the progress trend, we're not talking about the last 3 years, we're only talking here about the last 2 years. Was your progress in the top or bottom 20% for all pupils, for your low, middle or high priority attainers? So notice you need at least 6 pupils in each year for this to become a trend. So I have seen, for instance, maths, reading and writing progress was in the top 20% for at least 2 years for your middle and your high priority attainers, which might immediately make you go, well, what about our low priority attainers? Well, it turns out there were only 5 low priority attainers, so that wasn't eligible to be on the front page. However, when you investigate it, you actually find you were in the top 20%. So don't assume the absence is an absence because you didn't make the target. It might just be that you had low cohort. So what do you need to get this for all pupils? Well, you need around a plus 2.1, plus 2.2 or so in reading and maths, slightly lower in writing. And for the bottom 20%, you need around minus 1.8, minus 2, minus 2.2. It's roughly the same for your middle and high priority attainers. However, because of the wide range of progress that your low priority attainers can get, you need around plus 5 or minus 5 to get that as a strength or weakness. There are some additional key stage 2 statements. If your score has been adjusted, in other words, your pupils have met and gone below that minimum threshold that you can get for progress, and if it's made a change to your school score of at least 0.1, then this will be recorded. So your adjusted progress score in reading or maths was 0.2 higher than the adjusted score. 3 pupils had an adjustment to their score. Name the subject. Progress for SEN support was significantly above or below the national for all pupils over the last 2 years. This seems to be very rare. I have not actually seen this being used in any IDSR I have seen. And then there is a note for junior schools, which generally have higher attainment but lower progress scores. So if your school is a junior school, then inspectors should be aware of this and consider a wide range of information and data, including the progress of current pupils in all year groups. So in the next video, we'll have a look at some points to ponder for Key Stage 2. So here are some points to ponder for Key Stage 2. How did you do? What percentile rank were you? And you can find that out, as I say, in our DAISI Education blog. How did this vary across subjects? Were you well above? Were you above? Were you well below? Were you below the national average? How did this vary across subjects? And what about your high priority attainers? How did this compare with your low and your middle priority attainers? We're seeing a lot of emphasis in Ofsted inspections on high priority attainers, and there is some but a less emphasis on the low priority attainers. How far from national figures was the progress? Bear in mind you may have small cohort size, preventing the progress from being statistically above or below. What about your number of pupils away from your attainment? What could that information give you? Which groups made the most progress and which made the least? And how did this vary between subjects? Which groups were in the top or bottom 10% compared to all pupils nationally? How did you do, not just at the expected standard, but at the high standard or the greater depth? And we are seeing a lot of emphasis in the inspections on the high or greater depth standard. How did this vary between subjects and groups? What actions are leaders taking to improve these subjects? So Ofsted is not just interested in what happened last year, but what you are currently doing about it this year. How do subject leaders monitor the quality of teaching? How often are book scrutinies undertaken and what do these show? And again, we're seeing a lot of emphasis in Ofsted inspections on pupils' works, in other words, their books, on the teacher tracking system and the correlation between the two. So in other words, does your teacher tracking accurately reflect the pupils' works? Are there any elements which are weaker? And did you have external moderation? How is the school tracking the performance of all groups? However, please note, Ofsted has got no opinions as to which the best school tracking system is. It just needs to be one that is appropriate for your school. Are teachers aware of which pupils are at risk of falling behind, and is there a trend? What's the current picture for all groups across the school? How are you raising attainment? Have a look at your school self-evaluation and your school improvement plans, and do these identify weaknesses and clearly plan actions to address these? So here are some points to ponder for Key Stage 2. Let's see how your Key Stage 2 disadvantaged pupils are represented in your IDSR. Well, unlike the 2017 version, it is only being represented in the progress analysis that you can see here. So here you can see your disadvantaged pupils, whether they are in line, below, well below average, above or well below average. And not only can the comparator be done with the 0, with the national average, but it can also be done with the national other, this solid green line. So if the entirety of this shape is to the left, the national other, then you are significantly below the national other. For an attainment analysis, please see your ASP report. However, that doesn't mean that the areas to investigate do not include Key Stage 2 attainment. It is solely that Ofsted thinks that it is duplicatory to put it in both the IDSR and the ASP. So let's have a look at the areas to investigate for Key Stage 2 disadvantaged. So name a subject at the expected standard was at or above the national for disadvantaged pupils, which in reality was, are you above the national other? Was your maths, reading and writing attainment in the bottom 20% for at least 2 years for disadvantaged pupils? Again, you won't actually find these figures in your IDSR. You will have to look in the ASP. So we're talking, was your reading and maths in the mid-40s or so or below? For larger schools, those who have got at least 11 for disadvantaged lower, disadvantaged middle and disadvantaged higher, then Ofsted may take those groups and say, were you significantly above or significantly below in terms of progress? Were you significantly above national, the national other? Were you significantly below the national other? Or were you significantly below the national disadvantaged? So this will only happen if you have got particularly high disadvantaged cohorts. Over the last 2 years, were you in the top or bottom 20%? So we're looking at around plus 2.2 in reading and plus 1.9 in maths. But in the bottom 20%, we're looking at more minus 3.2, minus 3.5 figures. And those are the areas to investigate for Key Stage 2 disadvantaged. As I say, you'll need to supplement your IDSR with ASP as well to get the full picture. So here are some points to ponder at Key Stage 2 for your disadvantaged pupils. Were you above or well above, or below or well below the national other? How did this vary across subjects? And how did your high prioritizing pupils compare with your low and your middle high prioritizing pupils, your low and your middle disadvantaged pupils? Now, how effectively has the school identified the main barriers faced by different disadvantaged pupils? In particular, those with high prior attainment and those with low prior attainment who need to catch up. Now, in November 2018, the DFE released the Research to Understand Successful Approaches to Supporting the Most Academically Able Disadvantaged Pupils. And you can see the URL at the top if you want to read it. 76 pages, very detailed. But I just want to have a look at one of the main conclusions. Successful support was not about a single intervention, but it was about tailoring the support to meet pupils' needs across 4 areas: academic extension, cultural enrichment, personal development, and addressing material poverty. So hopefully that will help you identify the main barriers, and not only that, allow you to find out how your pupil premium funding was spent to address these barriers and how effective the various approaches were. So you've got a comparator there in this analysis, in this research study. How did your progress in attainment of disadvantaged pupils do compared to the previous year? And not just at the end of a key stage, how does it compare across the entirety of the school for disadvantaged pupils for reading, writing and maths? Have you identified areas for development linked to the attainment of disadvantaged pupils throughout the school? What ranking were you in? How did this compare the expected standard and also the high standard for the national other? Did this vary across different subjects? Now, again, Ofsted seemed to have rolled back from this at Key Stage 1, looking at the early learning groups. But it may still be interested looking for various groups in your disadvantage. Maybe you've got groups of SEN or groups of low, middle and high prior attainers. How did you do for those pupils? And you can use filters in the ASP to be able to hone in on your disadvantaged low, disadvantaged middle, disadvantaged high, for instance. And these are some points to ponder with regard to the closing the gap or diminishing the differences measure. Thank you very much for watching this video. Why not like us and subscribe to this channel? And why not subscribe to our free premium mailing list, where you can get 10% off our best prices and advance notice on what's happening.